we'll start with John Tortorella, who has moved on after 6 years coaching the franchise for which you work. What did John Tortorella mean to the Columbus Blue Jackets during his time there?
Yeah, he meant everything to the Jackets. It's obviously tough to lose a guy like Torts. He changed the culture here. I obviously left about 2 years before he got here, and then went and played for him in New York. And then once I came back here and took this job, he was here again. So our paths kind of crossed a few times, and it's tough to replace a guy like Torts and the work ethic that he brings, and the way he can drag people into a fight, the way he can get the best out of his players. It's tough, but it's time to look forward and try to figure out what the next move is.
Yeah, and obviously outside of finding a new coach, who do you guys want to build around? I guess so. When you have exit, interviews here, and me and Scotty were talking earlier about you come in and kind of tell guys what you expect out of them. Who do you guys really want to build around right now? And I guess in the draft, I'm sure you guys have an idea who you want to go after. Trying to fill the holes that maybe something you see you didn't like this year from your organization.
Yeah, obviously with the draft, we have 3 first-round picks. This upcoming draft, and it's a good thing, but it's also a weird thing because there hasn't been much, junior hockey played, and a lot of it's been on video scouting. So it's going to be a bit of a different year. As for building a team, you go through your exit meetings and you try to digest everything that happened and where the team stands. And when you talk about building around players, you always kind of have that cornerstone guy or 2 or 3 guys. And then, you bring in players from other ends. It seems like that's what all the championships teams do, and they build internally. With us, we got obviously 2 great goalies and Korpisalo and Merzlikins, and with Seth Jones and Zach Werenski, I think those are 2 huge names and 2 huge parts of our team. Obviously, I think both those guys finally put themselves on the map in that Toronto series in the bubble and Tampa the year before, where they were unbelievable. And up front is where we have some work to do. Obviously, we have a pure goal scorer in Laine, and we know what kind of world-class player he can be. So it's a matter of getting everyone to buy in and believe in what we're doing here. And then I think the biggest thing, and I'm sure you guys can believe this, but it's to build internally too.
With Rick Nash on leadoff, Sportsnet 590 The Fan. So you've been on both sides of it, Rick, as a player and now as a front office executive. Take us to the extent that you can behind the curtain of an exit meeting. And I know it would be different for each player. Are these meetings typically pleasant? Do they ever occasionally get unpleasant? What are some of the things that get discussed?
Yeah, I think I know for me when I always went in my exit meetings, you always wanted, or any meeting for that matter, you always wanted honesty, and you wanted the coach or the GM to be up front. And I always like to know where I stood with the organization and what the organization's plan was. I think as a player, I think it's fair to know that side of the team. So, for the most part, it's just kind of a review of how your season was. Most of the time it's what you have to do to take your game to the next level. I can't remember one time a coach not telling me that this is the biggest summer of your career. So that message is obviously put out there every time. But you know what? It's fun to be on the other side and see how it is and kind of give my input and feedback to the players.
Yeah, and do any of the younger players ever reach out to you outside of those meetings, or for advice during the season? Because I feel like if I had someone that had the career you had in the NHL internationally, it would be such a opportunity for these young players and prospects to have a guy in the organization like yourself. Have you had any of those conversations or away from the rink where you kind of pull a guy over, you go down to practice? I know it's a little bit tough with the pandemic right now and being around the guys. I'm sure there's a lot of restrictions, but what are those conversations you do have with those prospects or first rounders or guys that are, trying to establish themselves as an NHLer?
Yeah, you know what? It's a great question and a great topic that you bring up, because it's something that I've really taken a liking to, is kind of that development side and that mentor side, and trying to help these guys. And my first year I was just kind of hanging around and figuring out where I wanted to go in what direction. And then last year I started to go see some of our draft picks with Foodie and Angle playing in the OHL. I'd go down to Cleveland and see our guys there and just kind of be around for them to pick my brain, or for me to try to help them. But this year has obviously kind of put a halt to it, especially with having that modified bubble and, not having outsiders in. So it was different, but I'm hoping that things will go back to normal. And you're right. I feel like I have some knowledge that I could pour onto these guys, and it's a part of the job that I like to see them develop and hopefully have success.
What's a thing or two, Rick, that you've learned working in the front office under Jarmo Kekalainen that you may have been oblivious to as a player? Because you're so focused on your job when you're playing, you're probably not stepping into the shoes of a front office type very often. What have you learned on the gig or during the gig that you didn't know previously or were quite surprised to learn?
Yeah, so the two biggest eye-openers for me was one, how hard these guys work. And I'm not just talking about the GM and assistant GM and president. I mean, these scouts that are traveling around to 3 or 4 or sometimes 5 games a week, and, traveling to smaller towns where, they're 3-4 hours away from the airport, leaving their families, guys with young kids, whatever it is. When you're on the ice, you're just so focused on yourself and your game and your team, and you don't realize what goes into building these organizations. And scouts are sometimes one of the biggest parts of it for your organization growth. And it was so impressive to see how hard these guys work and how much time they put in and how much they love the organization, and don't really get to reap the benefits of 18,000 people cheering for you, but they're a huge part of it. The second thing I would have to say is how much of a process it takes and how long it takes to, trying to sign a guy, whether you're trying to make a trade. As a player, it was always like, all right, well, let's get some help. Let's trade for this. Let's try to go in a different direction and do this. Let's sign this guy. And you really have an appreciation for it once you're behind the scenes and seeing how the process takes of these things to happen.
Riley Nash's last game was April 4th, the game against Florida with you guys, and he hasn't played for the Leafs yet. What are we expecting out of Nash? Coming, is he fourth line? Can he play some third line minutes? Penalty killer? What do you see at him? What can we expect?
Yeah, so obviously I've watched Riley play for the last few years, and then got to play with him for a few months in Boston when I got traded there. So I know him well, and a big thing that sometimes fans or people don't hear about, but how good of a guy he is in the room. And as we all played, and we all know how important that is. That's a huge factor that he brings on the ice. He's a good face-off guy. He's a good penalty killer. I remember playing against him when he was in Carolina, and he's just always in the way. He's responsible in his own zone. He's got a good shot. He can chip in offensively, but I would say he's a reliable setter that's good in the faceoff dot, good in his own end, and good on the PK.